I think, and I know actually, that there are millions of Americans in this country that have no issue at all with what people do in their personal lives, whether they're gay, transgender, anything in between. But they draw a line at pushing an ideology onto children. And the difference between what's happening with kids now in school and when I was growing up, I had feelings of being transgender and uncomfortable with my body at a very young age, but it wasn't pushed on me. It wasn't validated by the world around me. I had to actually fight to be who I am. Now you have teachers fighting to make kids trans. And that's incredibly disturbing, not only to, parents, I can only imagine, I'm not a parent myself, but to me as a trans person to see, something that is so real to me be used in this political agenda. And it's disturbing. I think.
All righty, people. Good evening. For those who were not watching 45 minutes ago as I testified at the National Citizens Inquiry, for those of you who don't know who Blaire White is, and I made a joke, I'm not going to do the White thing all night because I don't know if everybody is as loves Family Guy as much as I do. Some of you might not know who Blaire White is. Oh, that dog. Hold on one second. Damn it. Get out. Go. Get out. Sorry. I did not know who Blaire White was until I knew who she is. And when I first became aware of Blaire's internet presence, I didn't know, the important thing. I came across Blaire's Twitter feed and said, "Oh, this is a anti-feminist woman," not knowing anything about Blaire as a person. And then when I learned all this, it puts certain things in perspective and highlights the crux of the national discussion that has hit the fore now, as relates to what is being referred to as the trans ideology, the trans debate. And you have someone like Blaire who is, and I know people are going to get mad, like, where do you draw the distinction as referring to Blaire as a she versus Dylan Mulvaney as a he? We're going to talk about this because it's good. I've been watching a lot of Blaire's podcasts, and I think I've pinpointed a new point of understanding in my own mind. But for those of you who don't know, okay, first of all, no medical advice, no legal advice, no election fortification advice. Blaire is great. I follow her channel. We've got so much to talk about because the idea of being anti-feminist or critical of the feminist ideology, but being a biological male, born male, and gone through the surgeries as an adult, we're going to get into it. It's going to be a fascinating discussion. If you don't know who Blaire White is, I'll do it once. Blaire White. You're going to know who Blaire is after this interview. Blaire, I'm bringing you in 3, 2, 1. Add to the stream. How goes the battle?
Hi, I'm really good. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on. I mean, people actually in the chat had been asking me for a while, and I don't know how long I've been following you for, but look, straight up, I when I first discovered your Twitter feed, I didn't know the critical element of you, and just said, "Oh, look at this! There's someone who's surprisingly in line with the way I feel about the way the world has gone these days." But for people who don't know who you are, if you would, please, 30,000 foot overview before we delve into childhood and then into modern day madness.
I guess the overview is that I am a YouTuber with my main channel that is just called Blaire White, my name. I have a podcast called The Blaire White Project on my second channel. You can just search that name. And I guess I am an influencer TM. That's my technical job title, but I do politics. I do social commentary. I talk a lot about trans stuff, which is funny because in my real life I don't, but on the internet I do. And I provide a perspective that I guess is more rare within the community in the sense that I am a Republican and I do have center-right beliefs. And so oftentimes people are taken aback by that. And so I guess that's who I am.
All right. Awesome. And now, am I allowed to ask how old you are?
Yeah, I'm 29.
29 years old. All right. Let's. And by the way, the TM was trademark, right? There's not a term of the art that I don't know that is TM.
No, I just meant like that's my official.
Okay. So 20. Let's back it all the way up to childhood. Are you born in America? Born and raised?
Yes, I was born and raised in California, and I moved to Texas a few years ago, which was the best decision of my life.
Did you move during COVID?
Yeah, I moved in the thick of it. I couldn't take any of the commie stuff anymore.
All right, now, so born and raised in California, that already is going to raise some flags for some people out there, given life trajectory. Siblings, what did your parents do?
Yeah. So I don't like to talk too much about my family to give their identity up, but I come from a nuclear family, a mom, a dad, a brother, and what they all do is very separate than what I do. But very typical, I guess, upbringing. I mean, there was, I guess, some negative things that happened, as with everyone, but not so atypical.
Okay, interesting. And now I do know this from previous podcasts. Uh, your memory of being a child is, as of a young age of 5, you felt that something was not quite right within.
Right. So my earliest memories in life of experiencing gender dysphoria, which is a mental health condition, was probably around the age of 5. I remember being in preschool and experiencing it. And, those feelings only intensified through my life. And people often find, or they uh, sometimes disingenuously find some hypocrisy in my stance against children transitioning, um, with the fact that I say that I experienced this condition at a young age. And for me, that has nothing to do with a child's ability to consent, whether or not they feel those emotions or that mental health condition. So just the fact that I had gender dysphoria doesn't mean I could have consented to a transition underage, in my opinion, which is, I believe, the correct opinion.
I don't I played the opening clip of your interview with now I forgot his name, because I think it is the opinion of most reasonable people out there. Nobody cares what an adult does with their body, whether or not someone thinks at 20 you're enough of an adult to make that decision. Look, if you can go fight and die in the military, you can decide what you do with your own body.
Right.
But as a 5-year-old, and I mean, look, I feel empowered a little bit. I've said it before. Gender dysphoria is a diagnosable clinical condition. It's not to make fun of it or anything. It's what it is.
It was
But
in the DSM for decades. This is not something new. This is not a new phenomenon. This is something that has been studied actually throughout history. But it's only once things became very politically correct that they took it out of there, which I think actually harms trans people because it gives us less information to understand who and what we are, right? I think of like the kids coming up now and the kids who, they say that they're trans. I'm like, what does it even mean to them? Because for me, when I realized I was trans, it meant that I had a mental health condition and I sought help for that mental health condition. I don't know what trans means to Gen Z anymore, because to me, it was something completely different. Yeah.
let me ask you this: like, so as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, I find it amazing that people actually have memories of that age. But what is the memory of what it felt like? What sort of behaviors were you engaging in, and how did your parents respond to that? I mean, did you see a psychiatrist? Did you see a psychologist? That type of stuff.
Oh, I had never communicated it to my parents at the time. I didn't tell anyone in my personal life that I thought I was transgender until I think maybe like 18 or 19. I just held those feelings in and I tried to, understand them, which was pretty hard because they're complex feelings. But the best way I can describe what it felt like at that very young age, if that's what you're asking, is that I felt an intense misalignment with the way I was being perceived by the world and my self-concept. For whatever reason, at that age, at 5, when you should really be not even thinking too deeply about much of anything, I was having like deep introspective thoughts about why I was uncomfortable with my birth name. And I remember even going back, even at that young age, and being like, but why would I feel that way? Sarah doesn't feel uncomfortable with her name, thinking of other kids in my class. I don't know, Jonathan doesn't. It was also more than that, though. It was also the role that I was expected to sort of fit. Preschool is when you start seeing like the division of genders kind of more clearly. Like preschool teachers start doing, these are the boy activities, these are the girl ones. And I never aligned with the boy stuff. And then as I got older, it turned into a body thing. So it wasn't just a role or a societal role. It was like, oh, I'm uncomfortable with how my body is developing through puberty. Why is that bringing me distress? This is something that's objectively, or should be objectively, a normal experience going through male puberty for a male. But for whatever reason, it was unsettling. So what I always say is, there's been studies that show that if left alone, the majority of children who experience gender dysphoria will grow out of those feelings by the time they reach the age of adulthood. For those people, it's incredibly important to not medically intervene, because obviously there are, irreversible things that take place during a transition, physically, emotionally, psychologically, your brain, everything. For the cases for which those feelings persist into adulthood, that and only that is when it's appropriate on a psychological level, on a medical level, to medically intervene. And transition's far from perfect. I think there's a narrative that it's the correct decision for so many more people than it really is. I think it's right for a very small amount of people. But I didn't know what else to do other than transition. Once I was in my adulthood, I'm like, wow, these feelings just don't go away. I've gone to therapy about it. I've talked about it, and they just will not go away. Luckily for me, upon transitioning, all those feelings, for the most part, melted away. It's never completely curable, but I would say about 95% of it went away.
But you're gonna say like people feel like you felt discomfort going through puberty, and a lot of people are gonna say like Jesus, who doesn't? Boys get greasy skin, pimples, you start growing hair, your voice changes. I mean, some are gonna say that it's necessarily uncomfortable even in the ordinary run of things. I mean,
it is for sure.
What way was it? What way was it manifesting differently? Like, and people have to appreciate this when it is a diagnosable or diagnosed mental condition. The discomfort materializes in more tangible ways than call me they or call me he.
Yes. So once I hit puberty and my body started developing, I completely agree that puberty is a very awkward, like uncomfortable and insecure time for almost everyone, if not everyone. But the ways in which it was affecting me was very much different than my peers. And looking back, you're right. It's the greasy hair, it's the pimples, it's the acne, it's the girls are getting taller before the boys and all that kind of stuff. And for me, it was specifically about my secondary sex characteristics coming in. And it was specifically about the fact that again, going back to that misalignment I felt when I was 5, that it was taking me in the opposite direction of that. And also it manifested just psychologically. People forget there's a huge psychological part of gender dysphoria, which is like, I went years without leaving my house. I went because I just couldn't be seen. And that sounds so crazy and so intense to people who don't experience that. And that's why, for me personally, not for every person and definitely not for children, transitioning was the right thing, because the minute I did that, well, not the minute, but once I got deep enough into transitioning in the process, my entire life opened up. So I think that's really the marker, right? Is that unfortunately, a lot of people, when they transition, it's because they're misled and their life gets worse. My life only got better. So that's how I know it was the right decision for me. But unfortunately, there's just a lot of false narrative about transitioning, a lot of false narrative about what makes someone trans. Like we mentioned, having no diagnosis at all. Of course, you're going to have people detransitioning. You're going to have kids feeling like they ruined their lives and their body if you don't even have to diagnose it as a thing anymore. It just becomes plastic surgery at that point. That's if there's no mental health condition behind it, if it's not treating something, then it's literally just plastic surgery. And there's a reason why we make people wait until 18 for every other plastic surgery.
I mean, I feel I don't want to get in trouble, but you're a boy going through puberty. Are you attracted to other men? Are you attracted to other boys at this time?
Yeah, I was definitely attracted to males, although I wasn't thinking too much about it. That's another sort of interesting component to it, is that like I even knew other like homosexual males at the time. At that age, I had friends and they were all interested in homosexual males, and I never was. I was only interested in straight men. So that's kind of also another like hallmark of trans. And yeah, it is what it is. But yeah.
And I'll ask perhaps in one of the podcasts you're on, you had mentioned some childhood trauma. Now, a lot of people associate, or not associate, but I mean, there is a lot of causal association, or not anecdotal. What's the word? Not necessarily causal, but what's the word, for goodness sake, when it coordinates with?
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
With transgenderism later on. Had you had any experience like that, or is this the type of mental development that one could not blame on some form of trauma that could have triggered it?
Well, it's interesting because, okay, so let's get into it. You have this whole like born this way versus not argument, right? And they do that with gay people as well. And I've always found that argument interesting because what is really the difference between maybe something happening around like 3, 4, 5 years old that makes you develop into a homosexual or a transsexual and being born that way? Because you don't really have memories earlier than that anyways, right? So it's functionally almost the same thing. But for me, the trauma that I experienced as a kid was actually there was just a lot of like discord in my home. Although I feel like that's highly typical to see like your parents fight. And I don't think that that makes someone trans or gay or anything like that. Um, and then also a lot of the trauma was because I know people are used to seeing these like TikTok trannies who are like big dudes with beards and like purple wigs, like saying they're gonna like beat people up in the bathroom. And that's what people are used to saying. These like men who have literally no innate femininity. My feminine energy was so innate even at 5 that I was getting called it's on YouTube, right? The F.
Oh, I don't care.
Anti.
Say
All
whatever.
right, I was getting called a faggot at 5 before I knew what a faggot was, and before
Mhm.
any of these other kids should have known what a faggot was, right? And so that's how apparent my like innate femininity was. Not saying that made me a girl or made me a woman, but there's clearly feminine energy and masculine energy. So a lot of the trauma was around bullying for me. Long story short, was around like kids and families being crazy.
And how did your parents? Like I have my own anecdote. I used to be a counselor, and we could tell which kids were gonna. We knew that a certain kid was going to be gay before they
Yeah.
knew it.
Yeah.
They grow up to be happy gay adults,
Yeah.
and there's something that people can see and detect. By and large, that goes for the parents as well. Now, when your parents are having seeing you grow up, is it a source of embarrassment? Is it a source of shame? Is it something that is just don't ask, don't tell in the house, or do they support you nonetheless?
I think parents always know, right? I mean, they didn't know that it would end up meaning trans. I'm sure they always thought it meant a sexuality thing. I remember like once I got to a certain age, around like 12 or 13, I was like with my mom and she was like, "So are you gay?" And it was like a funny icebreaker. And I was like, "Mom, stop," So yeah, I think they always knew, but my mom was always my biggest supporter. My dad, everything was fine. We had a strained relationship when I became a teenager, but that also, again, I feel like is normal. Yeah, I'm sure they knew something was up.
Now, you reminded me, it's not because of the swear word. You reminded me, I got carried away and didn't realize we need to go over to Rumble. Everyone, I'm giving you the link there. We're going to end it on YouTube, and we're going to carry this on Rumble, and we're on Locals as well. Okay, ending it on YouTube now. People run over there. It's going to be